built a big data center for TikTok in Norway.
Oh, nice.
A huge one.
It's going downhill, I have to say. I mean, I like it less and less every day. Like they're trying to do long form, and you're just like, okay.
Yeah, and streaming is also coming to it. So
wait. Why am I hearing? Oh, because I have.
It's going down.
Interesting.
I have to say,
It's really interesting. It's not supposed to autoplay. I gotta.
So YouTube going?
Yeah, but the YouTube it was autoplay. Should not autoplay.
yeah, you switched that off some time back.
It should be switched off, but it's not. I gotta get my tea. Hold on.
I have to go fix the network issue. I'll be right back.
And Laura says that I did not give the correct QR code website, askofficehours.global. Apparently I said com. I don't know if anybody saw the 49ers game, but they had a halftime with a corgi race. And my dog is all full of himself now because he's like, yes, we're on national TV.
That is so cool.
If you've ever seen a corgi run at full tilt boogie, they're the funniest thing. Was they got these little tiny little legs.
Yeah.
And they're running so fast, they literally float above the ground.
Are they running after something or just running?
I think they're just doing it for the sheer joy of running. You got a note from Chad there, Ronnie.
You were talking over him, maybe. Chad, can you repeat?
Oh, no, it's panel chat text.
Mitchell, can you mute yourself for a second? Mark, can you mute yourself for a second? Oh, you're the one with the noise. You got noise.
You've got noise.
You've got noise.
Sounds like Steve Case.
Yeah, exactly. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about anything you ask about related to media mostly. And second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we're going to be talking about what we talked about. We're going to talk about all the things that we talked about over the last year and talk about things that we might want to see in the next year. So if you've got ideas, like don't think of them as questions, but think of them as suggestions or comments. If you're watching this and you think, wow, I really like this on Tuesdays, when we're talking about graphics, I really liked Alex Goldner's thing, or I liked when Nick Justition came on, or I liked whatever that is, throw those in as questions and just tag them so that we talk about them in the second hour. And if you've got ideas of things that you'd really like to see us cover more, throw those in and tag those as well. So that's what we're going to do all week. We're just this is our little retrospective week and trying to figure those things out. So we'll give you a cheat sheet at the beginning of the hour, and then let us know what you liked and what you'd like to see more. And again, you can tag those as questions in Mukana. You can also just say what you liked in the QR code. If you use the QR code there, you can go to askofficehours.global and use the QR code, or just type that in, askofficehours.global, and you can throw your suggestions in there as well if you're watching right now. So anyway, do one of those two, and we'll get to them in the second hour or whenever we finish the first hour questions. It's a little bit more relaxed between Christmas and New Year's. The length of the show and the structure of the show moves a little bit, but we'll jump right into it. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Mitch, what do we have?
Thank you, Alex. It's the more relaxed me here with Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, Canada, with a question. What tools and methods do you use to measure system latency from end to end in a video production pipeline?
Go ahead, Ronnie.
First and foremost, you can use a clapper, like the clapper that are being used in video, just to measure it. But if it's live, you probably have to do some digging into lip sync and viewing those. What we do is to play something on the big screens. I'll put a link in the Mukana for some clips. Then we pipe everything through the normal pipeline and record it on the viewer's glass with an iPhone or something, and then measure that in the editor afterwards.
Yeah, so when, and I'm assuming you're not talking about necessarily offset of audio, but really latency of the entire system. And so I do a lot of it. It's not so much latency within the building. I'm usually doing it between buildings. I'm trying to see if I can find a good example of this. This is a, let's see here. I think this is, I'm trying to find a good picture that I can show you. Hold on. So what I do is what you're trying to figure out as you work on this is making sure that you can see both the in and the out. And I usually use an iPad for this. There's a program called, let's see if I can show this here. Hold on. Let's see. There's a program called Movie Slate for the iPad. And the most important part of it is that it has a time code. And so what I do is I'm going to try to truncate something so I can show it to you here, because this will give you a sense of, sorry for the delay, but let's see here, I'm going to edit this. I just need to crop a little bit. Hopefully this will be okay. There we go. So here's an example of a round trip let's see if I can. Sorry for getting this set up, taking a little bit to set this up a little bit. So anyway, so here's a typical one for me to use here. I will cut to this. So what's happening is there's a bunch of things that are going on in this little mess. So I have this here and I'm shooting it. Now that I need to shoot it. Like if you have something else sourcing it, you're not testing what the camera's seeing in the latency. So that goes out. Now the camera, going out of the camera, it goes into my output system. In this case, this is using a delivery service called the Switch. So it goes out of there and into here. Then I'm also taking, there is a USB-C here that goes down to a USB Pre 2, which then outputs one channel that goes into the camera. So there's an audio, and what happens is that when I click this, it gives me 3 beeps and then it closes. The 3 beeps are really important to me because that lets me see the framing. So when I click on this, it'll do that. And so what it does is it goes into here. and I have the audio going into here. Then this audio and video go out into here, and it goes to another part of the world. Then it comes back, and I run it into this Pix 240. And the reason I do that is because the Pix 240 lets me do two things. It lets me see it, but it also lets me take the audio output. And one of the great things about the Pix 240 is it has this audio output. So I can take that audio output, and by the way, I'm also sending the mix pre into here as well. So I have a mix pre going in, I have this going in, I'm recording them all together, and then I'm sending this back out, the output of this back into the camera. The delta between the two audio sources, it tells me what my latency is, more than the video. The video is important. I like to look at it. It makes me feel happy. And I make sure that I can actually frame all of these at one time when I'm doing the test so that I can see what those things are. But the real accurate look at it is how long did it take the audio to get from here back to here, up to here, because it really is, these components tend to work at zero latency. So it really tells me what those are. And all I have to do is look at the delta between the two of them in NLE or whatever, and move those around, and I get a sense of exactly what I used to do it a lot of different ways. This is the best way so far, that I've done it. There is a piece of hardware, if you don't want to do the mess that I just created, that will do this. It's called a Matchbox. And the Matchbox does lip sync, but it also does system latency. So then what you do is you just plug the output of the Matchbox into the, whatever you're sending it to, and you take an output and you plug it back into the Matchbox, and it will immediately tell you what it is. So it's a lot simpler than what I'm doing here. The difference is mine is a little bit more true when it comes to understanding what the latency of the camera is. Like, for instance, one of the things we noticed when we did this test was that the camera was adding 40 milliseconds of latency. It was I was like, oh, I'm losing a little over a frame in the camera. And that was not something that I was really, I have to admit, it's obvious once I look at it, but it wasn't something I was thinking about, was that there was a little bit of delay there. So that's how I measure latency within a system, and again, my system tends to be cross country or other things like that. So anyway, that's a quick example of it. Go ahead, Mitch.
Is the slate next to the camera the source, and then what you're seeing up on the shelf there, is that the actual?
Yeah, this
looks
is
like
just
about 10 frame.
This is the camera
seconds.
window.
Yeah,
it's really hard to
off.
tell when you take a photo because it is. It's hard to look at when you take a photo because of the latency of the way the photo works. So I wouldn't put too much into that, but this is a 60 frames a second, so it's a little bit different in that area. So anyway, but the audio makes a big difference, as you go through that. So
And also make sure you have a short shutter time on the camera you're using to take the picture. That is also important.
Yeah. So this is just me. This is just me taking an iPhone photo of it, just going, hey, it's dark. I took an iPhone photo of it. So there's a whole bunch and it's a rolling shutter. So it actually, all those things make a difference as you go through it. It's more me documenting. It's more me. That picture is less about me looking at the time code, because the audio is all I care about. The audio round trip is what I care about in the latency. The pictures of the slate don't. It just happens to be the slate produces a really useful audio tone for me. To do that, and it also lets me mark it, and put notes, in it, and so on and so forth.
Just another example of a Pix 240 still being very useful.
I still have 3 of them. I will not ever give them up. There'll be a museum piece before I give them. They sell now for more than it cost to buy them in the first place. It is a crazy. They were, there's a handful of boxes, things that we've built or that we've used that just were special moments in time. That's the Pix 240 is definitely one of those special pieces of equipment that was made that was just genius. So next question.
And a question coming in from Matthew LeCompte in Oakland, shooting a podcast with a local host and guest from Nashville. Is Zoom ISO still best, or is Dante AV good for bringing remote audio and video in?
Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I don't know about Dante's AV, but I do know that Liminal and Andy and Jonathan worked really hard around the M1 processor to develop Zoom ISO. So it's tied into that whole Zoom infrastructure really tightly.
Yeah, I would still strongly recommend using Zoom ISO. You still need to. You may have Dante AV, which I wouldn't necessarily use, but you still need to move the. You still need to move the audio and video around, So I mean, you still need to capture it from Zoom. So Zoom ISO is going to be the way you want to capture it from Zoom. If you capture, here's the big advantage if you have a remote. So I do something that's similar to what you're talking about. I do a podcast it's called graymatter.show. We do it every Friday or almost every Friday with Michael Krasny, and I'm using Zoom ISO, and we stream it live so that the audience can ask questions. And so you'll see me post this inside of Discord every once in a while. When you jump in there, we're actually recording it, and you can actually post questions to the person that was that we're interviewing, which is kind of amazing. And so the way we do that, now I could just record it, and it would actually be pretty easy to do recording of it, but I have Zoom ISO, and I'm grabbing that ISO I'm taking a video ISO out, and I'm passing that. Now I have a Mac Studio. I'm delivering that directly to Mimo Live in the Mac Studio via Siphon. So I send that out to it. I'm looking at possibly sending it via NDI to another machine, but right now I use Siphon for it at the moment. And so I send it over Siphon, and then I have the local camera. Michael's actually right now coming into my office, and so he is here. And so I have a local camera going into Mimo Live. And then I take the audio and I send that audio out via Dante I have the audio going out via Dante out of Zoom ISO. And here's the advantage of that is if you just use regular Zoom, you're going to get the mix of whatever other people are in there and the producer and everything else. When you have Zoom ISO, you ISO it. You can grab that person. Like I want just the remote person. So what happens for me is that I'll hear, the producer talking to. I will hear the producer talking to the person, but I don't hear that in the stream. They can talk to them all they want. That's not going into the stream because what the stream is getting is that Dante output. Now that Dante output's going through loopback and coming, being routed and mixed so that it comes back the way it needs to come back. So that's the way that I do that, and I think that that's a great solution. Now, if you're only doing a podcast and there's only one person on the other side, you could probably hook something up that just took like the other way that the backup that I have is taking the vanilla Zoom output, pushing it into a mix pre, along with Michael's in a mix pre as well because that's how he's getting into the computer, and I just hit record on that. I hit that record like 20 minutes ahead of time. I just let it run. That just makes sure that I have something. I have like when I do a podcast, I have a tendency to record as many copies of it as I can, just to make sure that nothing goes wrong. And so anyway, so that's how I do it. But I find Zoom ISO to be kind of key to the operation. If you're still, I'm not saying that you're doing this. I'm saying that if you're listening and you're still screen scraping Zoom, that is crazy. It is crazy. Like you've got all this, debris on it. You've got all this other stuff. The color doesn't look as good. The frame rate isn't as good, in my opinion. Zoom ISO gives you this nice clean output of each person. And it's just such a great tool to use for that. So you should not, like when I still see people screen scrape and because you'll see something little pop up or you'll see a mouse or something like that. And you see the orange dot, like that orange dot isn't there if you're using an SDI output or Siphon. And anyway, so I see it, and you're like, really? and it'll be like a big event too, and they'll be doing this thing, and I'll be like, you really there's better ways to do this, and you want to call each person and just go, you didn't need to do that. Like it really would be better if you use Zoom ISO. Yeah, go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, Matthias doesn't say anything about if it's audio only or if it's video audio. It seems to be
because he asked for AV. I'm assuming that it's podcasts can be video. I mean, my first podcasts were all video, so it.
Yes, it can be both things, and there are other ways of doing it. Mimo Live, for instance, can get the ISO signals as well, and we have used StreamYard and Riverside a few months back. We were not satisfied with those two, but there are other options as well.
We used it depends on if you're trying to we're doing it live, and I did figure out how to use Squadcast. Squadcast will let you send out an ISO. I did it to each screen. Like I had this Squadcast goes out, this person goes here full screen, and this person goes full screen, and I figured out how to cut that all into Mimo. Unfortunately, 40 minutes into the show, Squadcast stopped recording. Like just killed the event, and so that turned out to be a dead end for us.
What about the other service you mentioned yesterday? Something for OBS?
Something for OBS. I don't think I mentioned that yesterday.
Similar to Zoom, but not exactly the same.
Are you talking about Stream Voodoo? Did I?
Yes, Stream Voodoo.
Yeah, Stream Voodoo. So I don't know what parts of it are. There's a couple different versions of Stream Voodoo, and the advantage of Stream Voodoo, it does have local recording. So you can actually, Stream Voodoo will let you record in ProRes locally, but you have to figure out how your what is the drive, the person on the other side, what do they have, because it's going to create a really large file. So if you're sending a computer out to do that, the advantage of Stream Voodoo is, again, it'll record that local camera in ProRes at 4K if you want, if you have an input for it. It'll also transport at 4K 60. So when it comes to really, super high quality transport, you can pick between VP9 and AV1, and there's a lot of it's really built as a kind of a high end transport tool. It doesn't have a lot of the kind of the creature comforts of Zoom, of us being able to just all jump in. There's a whole bunch of, it's a little bit more, it feels a little bit more like NASCAR at the moment as far as what it does, but it's the only app that I know that does a lot of those things well. So if you're looking for a really high quality, gamers use it to transport their screens to each other, and they can say, I'm going to grab my camera and this screen, and then they send links to somebody else. They just open those up, and then they're just getting those feeds, and the feeds are really high quality. Because you can turn the bandwidth in Stream Voodoo up to 20 megs a second. So if it's like, if I have the internet, I can use it. And so that's but again, I don't think it solves the same problem that Zoom does, and it you really have to kind of know what you're doing to use it at the moment. But it's a pretty powerful tool. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Is Wirecast on the list of alternatives?
I built my company on Wirecast, 15 years ago. I was doing Wirecast. Wirecast was our central editing tool, our streaming tool. We didn't really cut with it. We still had edit tools in front of it. I hear that it's gotten better. I got to tell you, the scars are deep, for me, and so I think that at least in the early days and really up until the last couple of years, I would say definitely on the Mac at least, the scars, it used to lose audio sync when you pulled the headphone jack out of your computer. It was like, it did a lot of things that we didn't expect. And so it was really useful. It was built directly. We could do only certain kinds of streams with it because it was built for corporate and stuff like that. But it's hard for me to bring myself to going back just because of my past experience. But I've heard that it's gotten a lot better, so I won't say one way or the other, although I will say that on a Mac, I'm pretty happy. I feel like Mimo Live and Ecamm are the two on the Mac, and OBS and vMix are the two on the PC, and in the cloud you have Vector and vMix and so on and so forth. And so I think there's a lot of, I feel like for me, those where I'd probably use the tools at the moment. And Wirecast doesn't. I don't think it's a winner in any of those. It might be, if you already have it, it might be usable, but I don't think it's where I would choose to start now. Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, second that. For Wirecast, we had a big problem, and nice to hear that you also had problems with the headphones. But maybe they have gotten better,
bug.
And maybe
it's a really crazy bug. And then we called, and they said, "Oh yeah, we know." And I'm like,
yeah, why don't you fix it? But maybe we should give them another chance. They have gotten better if rumors are right. Yeah. So maybe we should try them.
Yeah, it's. I think that sometimes I have to look at, like, why would you try something? Like, once you get to something where I'll decide something's a leader in this. Now, there's money might be one of those things that you try, but I kind of, it's the same when I look at different packages. I look at, if I really have the money or I'm doing this platform, I use this. I try not to have, like, there's 6 versions of what I could do. I'm like, what is the best one on that platform? And the best reasonably cost one on a PC, for instance, I think is vMix. And then you have OBS works really well on a PC, and it's very flexible. But in my world, those are the 2 PC apps to do online, software-based shows. And then you have, in the cloud, you have vMix and Vector. Those are the 2 that I would think of there. And on the Mac, I have Mimo Live and Ecamm, and it just depends on what your budget is and what you want to get out of it. And so anyway, those. And by the way, I'm going to announce this a little later, but Oliver and I are going to hang out tomorrow at noon Pacific Standard Time and talk about Mimo, because there's a bunch of things I want to add. I don't know how to add in Mimo. So I'm sure they're simple. So I figured, well, I was going to talk to Oliver about it. And I was like, it's between Christmas and New Year's. Why don't I just turn it on and let people sit and watch Oliver? And I'm not giving Oliver a lot of notes. So he's going to have to figure it out. He's going to have to tap dance. But I'm going to ask him some stuff on how do I do this and how do I do that. So anyway, next question.
From Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. Conversations with Tony Mobley is using a Mac M1 Basic and my 14-inch MacBook Pro M1 Pro to run the show with Mimo Live. Should I upgrade Mac Mini to a Studio or the MacBook?
Go ahead, Mark.
So, Tony, I really don't know. I don't know what the situation is. I do know that of the two machines you've chosen to upgrade to, the Mac Mini and the Studio, you're going to get more input-output with the Studio. You'll probably have a little bit better transfer speed, depending on what side of the the input-output you're using. The Mac Mini is going to give you two USB-C Thunderbolts and USB-Cs and two USB-As. The Studio is going to give you a lot more. There is the Mac Mini Pro that'll give you two extra Thunderbolt Cs.
Well, and I think he's on the Mac Mini. He's trying to decide between a Studio and a MacBook. I think that's the
So I would go with the Studio just because of the input-output.
Yeah, I mean, I really think MacBooks, laptops are made for when you're going to go somewhere. If you're building a Studio, don't build it into a laptop. There's a whole bunch of things about it. Number one is the bang for your buck for performance is going to be better with a desktop machine, especially now. You could get the MacBook M3, is great, but I don't know how much it would affect what you're doing there. I would look at the Mac. I'm doing what I'm doing on Mimo Live. I'm doing it with a Mac Studio, and it's the Max, not the Ultra. And that's a great value. You're going to have more Thunderbolt ports. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not sure if I think that there's controllers, because you've got four Thunderbolts on the, I believe you have four Thunderbolts, maybe only three on the MacBook Pro. But I think that you have only two controllers for those. I'm not 100% sure of that. Maybe the new one might have four. The problem is that you got the screen that you got to open and now figure out where to do it. And you got a keyboard in a place that you don't want. I have one keyboard and I have 6 computers. I have a little button that I push when I want to jump to the different computers. And so I, using a KVM, I don't want the keyboard part of the computer and I don't want the screen part of the computer in a system like this because, like, for instance, I've got 4 monitor outs of my Mac Studio and they go into a router which I can then route to any screens that I want, so I can reconfigure things as needed so that I can, look at them the way I want to look at them. And so just those things, regardless of power, what I would say is that just the ability to move those screens around and just the ability to have your screen not connected to your computer and your keyboard not connected to your computer, I think leans you towards a Studio if those are the two you're choosing.
And you're still going to use the Mac Mini for something, so you can just stack it on top of the Studio.
And they fit. They're exactly the same size. Yeah. It's really nice. Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, and 2 other things. If you're using a MacBook, you are limited to the screen that is inside the computer, and you can't use more than 1 or 2 HDMI outs. If you're using a Mac Mini or a Studio, you will have several outputs. The other thing is cooling. I've seen on my MacBook Pro M1, sometimes it struggles with the cooling. And even if the CPU is powerful enough, you wouldn't get into a situation where the cooling is a problem and it starts to throttle down like it does on the MacBook Airs.
I've got all these computers sitting on my desk and I never hear them ever. It's quiet all the time. Yeah, I agree. So I would go if you're picking between a MacBook and a Studio. I think that there's an argument to what Mark was talking about, that the Mac Mini Pro, there's an argument that you probably could pull it off with that. But if you could, I would get the Studio. You're going to have still more power and so on and so forth. Next question.
From Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, Canada. Has anyone tested the new Miele Quieter 4 PC with upgraded Alder Lake N100 processor? I'm curious if it can finally get 1080 out of the Zoom client.
On paper, it should. It's got 4 cores, so it's got. We haven't tested it. I've got a couple of the 3s here, but we think that 4 cores is the benchmark that has to be made, but we haven't. No one's bought one yet, so I think a lot of us have them laying around. So it's a great little box for a PC, and it is, and it's got. And I've got a couple of them that I use for utility stuff. I have the Quieter 3s. I have 2 of those. And so but I think that if it does it, it's a really great solution, because now you have you have something that's going to output 1080p from a very small. It's $379, I think. So it's a really inexpensive, less expensive than a Mac Mini, smaller than a Mac Mini. And if you're just using it as a remote, it's a good argument to use it. So I'll be really interested to see who gets one first and validates whether it works or not. Next question.
Bobby Rafferty in Central Florida wants to know, how many copies of projects do you keep in software that auto-save?
So many. I think of saving like climbing up like I used to. I know I don't look like it now, but I used to do a fair amount of rock climbing, and one of the things that I had to deal with is, how far are you willing to fall? Like when you drive a pin in, how far are you willing to fall? Now the autosave helps, but then it just makes in my opinion, it makes a big mess. There's a bunch of messes that occur. So usually when I open something and I'm going to work on it again, I immediately, because of autosave, I immediately duplicate it. Like I just duplicate this file and I start working. That way I always can go back, and it's not so much that I lose something, but I might have deleted something, got rid of something, whatever. And I find like digging through autosave to try to find, and I definitely don't want it to be the only versions, the last version that I did. I want to go back. I may have, like, for instance, slide decks are a good example. I have a slide deck that I'm working on right now. It's probably it's in the version 40 range. There's like 40 versions of it, and I put the date on it. So in that case, I don't really give it a version. I say, it tells me what date I started working on it again. And so I do, I think that it's important. Naming conventions help. So you want the names to be the same except for the versions or the date or both. But I make a lot of copies of things because I will admit that I don't do it as much in something like Final Cut because it's really cumbersome to do that. But I in most applications, even if they autosave, I duplicate the files pretty often, and it's mostly just to save what I changed. And it's not so much to save the project. I also have a tendency, the way I write, the way I used to code when I was a kid, and the way I do projects oftentimes is I go by in 3 passes, which is the first pass is I just throw things against the wall as fast as I can. I don't worry about doing it correctly. I don't worry about naming anything. I don't worry about anything else. I just kind of just do it, try to figure it out, and then I save that, but then I throw it all away and I start over on a clean slate. And then I do it again with all the stuff that I learned, and then I throw that away. And then I go by and I name every file and every layer and everything else, and I just very methodically put together what I'm trying to put together. And that's kind of how I've done things for 30 years, 40 years. Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, and make sure that you also take a backup of the autosaves so that you have both locally backup and maybe also an external backup that you can remove. So that's also good to.
I have to say, like with a lot of the stuff, I spent a lot of time in Keynote, as I mentioned before, and being able to save to iCloud, and then it just shows up on all these machines. And, what's great is I have a presentation machine that it's a little off to the side, so it's a little inconvenient to work in. So I work in my main machine. Every time I hit save, it just updates. It just updates over here. It's nice. Next question.
Hasmut Gajar in Cape Town, South Africa. Sad to say, in all my medical events, I've not utilized a Rundown app. Watched John Barker this week. Some lights went on for me. Duh. Never thought I needed one. Is Rundown Studio ready to go? And anyone played with it?
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, I played with it for a few weeks. It could be ready for prime time. I would not suggest that you start the first important meeting with it. It has some things that it's lacking, and John Barker and his crew has asked us to test it more and give some feedback of things and functionality that we need. There are other stuff out there. We use a lot of the stage timer, which Lucas has been building for a few years with good results, and using both for a few months would be a good thing to do, I think.
Yeah, and we're pretty excited about it. I think that it'll be really interesting to see how it goes there. I would, like Ronnie, with any software, try to get a demo of it and play with it. Put together some ideas. If you can, run small shows with it, and that's how we approach all software. But it looks very promising. It's I love the design of it right now. It just really feels very elegant. So we'll see how it goes. Next question.
Another QR code question coming in from Sharid Zad in Oman. Why the video lags behind the audio today? Is that a sync issue?
This is a QR code, and I think it came in probably over Sunday. So for the weekday shows and for Saturday show, it goes through a delay. The audio goes through a delay on the output, and so it resyncs all of those things up. On Sundays, we don't do that because we're inside of Zoom, and so because so many of us have a separate audio and video pipeline before they go in, we're oftentimes all a little out of sync, and that's fixed in the weekday shows, but not on the Sunday show. And so that's the reason that's the case. And we're not trying to right now. We're not trying to necessarily fix that. And the reason for that is that we actually down the road we don't want our panelists to delay their audio to fix it at all. What we want to be able to do is individually delay each person, which we're working on right now, so that there's individual delays on our system that allow us to make those adjustments. And the reason that that's important to us is because it minimizes the delay that we have with each other. In fact, one of the things I was talking to Andy about was the potential. He suggested that we look at the music collaboration latency latency the panelists, because what goes out to Zoom ISO will still be the cleaner version, but the panelists would actually even have less. Our show is somewhat resilient to that because of the way we structured it, but we would have even less latency between us. It'd be good for the birthday singing. Anyway, next question.
Dear me. Talalek Lopez Waterman in Bensberg, Germany. Alex, have you considered using the integrated Zoom connection in Mimo Live? And do other panelists have thoughts about this?
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yes and yes. We have been testing it for some time now after we got the hand of it, and with good results. We had some issues running it on the older M1 Mac Mini, but after we put it on the studio, the problem seems to go away. So I think it's a solid thing to play further with, and I'm actually planning to do a live, pretty big productions in Europe in the beginning of January with it. So I'll give you a feedback on that.
What's your process to joining a meeting? So that's the thing that I was looking at. Is it a command line to join it, or is there a manual way to do that? Because I can see Zoom input, but it doesn't seem to, or Zoom meeting, but it doesn't seem to give me the places to put something. So how do you join a meeting with Mimo?
Well, you have if you're talking about the return back video, that's the thing we had problem on the Mac Minis. It seemed to go away on the Mac Studio. Could be different versions of something, and we had to do the trick with the closed command line to. And so,
but how do you join a Zoom meeting from Mimo to grab the ISOs?
Yeah, you just connect to the meeting in the main menu and log in through that, and then you have to, of course, access the or request the
right.
ability to stream like you do in Zoom ISO. So it's very similar, and it's working pretty good. The return video is a little bit more problematic, and
right.
I hope to have that fixed in a week or two.
Yeah, we're definitely looking at using it, and that's one of the things I'll be discussing with Oliver tomorrow. So we'll be testing that process tomorrow and talking through that step by step. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. When I had difficulty taming a synth bass part in the latest track I'm working on, I used a mid-side EQ, a mid-high-pass filter at 60 hertz, and a minus 3 dB side cut at around 1 kilohertz, and it worked perfectly. Can mid-side processing be used effectively on non-acoustic sources?
I am not certain. I mean, here's the thing with almost all the processing that you'll find with Studio and Post Gear and so on and so forth is, if it's working, it's working. I see so many people do crazy things with their analog, with their digital, et cetera, that I would say that if the only way to really know whether it works in the way that you want it to is to try it. There's so many things that we use audio for. I mean, if you look at how sound effects are created or albums are created and everything else, a lot of the breakthroughs are because someone used a product not the way it was designed. So I would give it a shot and see if it works. But really, it is more of a creative process than is it proper to do it that way. So I'd go ahead and give it a shot and let us know how it works. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida has a question. Social media platforms have become increasingly intertwined with broadcasting. Will we see a future where social media is the primary distribution means for broadcast news?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Already happening.
Yeah. I think that we're probably, broadcast news is, it has a certain number of people watching it that are going to keep watching it that way. Social media is it's about to exit its limelight, most likely. I mean, if you look at how people view social media, they're looking for something else. They haven't found it yet. But the people are not happy with Twitter or with Facebook or with many of the other platforms, and so there's not really any, but there's no heir apparent right now. So no one knows, But as soon as something comes into that window and fills that space, it's most likely, and we see this all the time. Radio didn't go away, newspapers didn't go away. Newspapers have been around for a long time. They're not the same. They don't have the same impact that they had in the. Radio is not the same as it was in the 30s or 40s or 50s. But it still is business, and it's still generating millions and millions of dollars or billions of dollars of revenue, but it's not something that and it still fills a certain niche. And Mark can probably talk to this more than me, but it still fills a certain niche that we don't get from anything else. So I think that you're going to see things continue to go down that path where we're still looking at broadcast for certain things. We're still looking at social media. I mean, one of the things we saw is broadcasters actually pulled away from social media. They post things into social media, but what they don't do much anymore is do things like, hey, you can hashtag this or hashtag that. Like the hashtagging. And when people start talking about hashtagging, you kind of know that they're kind of on the older end of the agency process, because the hashtags don't really work. And the reason the hashtags don't really work for a lot of those things is because you can't get big influencers to use them, because they don't want it unless they're getting paid for it, because it junks up their feed. And so you end up with a lot of individuals using it, but it's not really getting to the spread that you thought you were going to get into it. And so people put the hashtags on there, and that's fine, but it's not. And I think it's safe to throw the hashtags on, but I don't see them making any major impact to the virality of a video most of the time. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
So from what I understand, and the numbers that I'm referencing are probably 2022 numbers, because 2023 numbers aren't necessarily in, but it was the first year that radio advertising beat television advertising in terms of the dollar amount that was spent. It's also a number of very large advertisers started to reconsider social media as an advertising platform and started to pull back into more traditional advertising. So you're seeing radio go up. What I think is going to happen, in my humble opinion, is that the streaming will become the basis for all distribution, and everything else will support it. So you'll use social media to point people to whatever platform your main platform is. That may become your website, because radio is going to start to do other things besides just audio. And I mean, we're doing it right now. We're bringing video in. We're utilizing radio and streaming simultaneously to really reach larger and larger markets.
Yeah, 100%. So it'll be interesting. I think that the social media platforms really have a lot of challenges in front of them. I think that the one that seems to be kind of sidestepping a lot of those challenges is YouTube, only because it's become kind of what everybody's using. It's almost a utility at this point. A bunch of people at YouTube just grabbed their pearls when I said it's a utility, because they'll be worried about regulation. But anyway, it's at this point it's not really a social media network as much as it is just a delivery of video. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Next question.
Tommy Shand, St. Paul, Minnesota. What are the methods of bringing in video clips and other graphics from the panelists on this program? Is there any special office hours magic or just shared screens?
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Office hours is magic. So everything we do here is magic. I just wanted to say that I'm not sure exactly how it's done in the backend, but I'm signing up for learning that, and that's what you also could do, Tommy. If you want to learn something about the backend, you should join the team and just learn how to do it. So I guess Alex can fill in on the details.
Yes, you should join the team and learn how it's done. So I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure of the current technique that's being used for that. So yeah, you should jump in, take a look at it. Next question.
Robert Shoji from Los Angeles. Any opinions on the crucial X9 Pro SSD compared to the Samsung T5?
You know, I think that what the hard part is that a lot of us don't have that one necessarily. And what I found is that I can't look at the stats on an SSD and make a decision about whether it's valid or not. You know, I've kind of learned to, be very careful of that process. It's amazing how inexpensive things have become, so 4 terabytes is $250, which is pretty amazing. It adds Mylio Photos Plus. I hate it when people put software on their drives. Anyway, so it looks great. Read and write speeds, it says, is 1 gig a second essentially, and so a gigabyte per second. So it theoretically could be very fast. The hard part is that, like, what happens when we sustain it? So, it has that speed, but is that a burst speed? Is that the same speed 45 minutes later? Is it, those are the kind of things that we'd have to test to know. And I think that, that we'd have to get one in there. So we might take a look at that. Go ahead, Ronnie.
I know Philip Bloom has tested these and used them for some time, both this one and the older ones, and he seems to be very satisfied with them. So if he's using this for his own editing, I guess it should be at least good enough to test out.
I mean, the big thing I want someone to do is, and he may have done this and reported on it, but you take a file that's take a 2 gig file to move 2 gigs of files. It doesn't have to be a file, 2 gigs of files, and move them from one crucial to another, inside of a subsystem. And does it slow down? Like that's all I want to know. Is that, at moving 2 gigs over, is it going to slow down at some point? Is it going to overheat at some point? And if it does, when is that going to happen? I can tell you the T5, it's about 440 gigs. It's that I'm almost guaranteed it will drop to almost zero when you do that. So those are that's, it's not that they won't do it. It's just when is it going to do that? So next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida. In the coming years, AI will enable highly personalized experiences. What viewing experiences do you imagine in the future, and how will they affect production requirements?
Good, Mark.
Well, I think it's just going to be amazing that you'll be able to sit down in a site where you're going to do a shoot, put on a 360-degree camera, have it just go ahead and scan that whole thing, and then because it's digital, it'll be able to do all your cable runs for you. It'll tell you how many cables to bring, what types of cables to bring, and it's just going to make things a lot easier and get rid of a lot of the redundant work that you have to do over and over again.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm thinking more in terms of what cookies do for you. And here's the thing, is that algorithms have been doing this in one form or another for a long time, and now algorithms are being rebranded as AI because it's the thing now with AI. So it's very interesting to see what's happening. But yes, get ready for it to happen in every aspect of your life, from what TV channels you want to see, what shows you like on your subscription services. Everything is going to be affected that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a there's a couple things that are really kind of interesting. I play a lot in Midjourney. I'm definitely playing a lot in Midjourney 6. And the photorealism is pretty amazing for stills. And we're already seeing Runway.ai doing video and so on and so forth. I don't know how long it will take for it to really become something that I would use in a production. But I just did one. Hold on, I'll show you. This, let's see. Yeah, this is a good example. So I was testing 6. And what I did is I asked for Tatooine half planet. I happen to have done a bunch of shots with Tatooine, I know what that looks like, or what I got. So I asked for Tatooine half planet from space, and what I got was that. Okay, so that you may think, well, what are you going to do with that? Well, a lot of times we don't have we didn't need the whole resolution to do this. What we did is we take a sphere in Cinema 4D, back then it was electric image, and you camera map it. So you map it from the camera, you project it from the camera onto the sphere, and then I can do a shot. And I'm playing around with doing a shot. And one of the big things that was keeping me from doing the shot is like I can build a ship, but I don't have I don't have a good matte painting. And so I was like, I don't have Brian Flora, who was the person who did the matte paintings that I used. And so to do these, and his, I think his were better than this, but this was generated in 15 seconds and I can use it as an example. And so there's a lot about it that really, works. Again, would I use this instead of a matte painter? Probably not if I had the budget, but if I want to create a quick demo, and definitely if I want to do previs, I can throw this together and make it work. And so the point is that, I'll be able to put that on. I'll do that at some point in time. We'll show it on office hours. But that kind of quality of being able to throw that in there is eventually going to be something I could say, I want to do a push into that, and it'll just do it, and I put some planets on there, put a planet back there, move the sun over here. I want 100, like I did there's a shot in Star Wars over Coruscant where you see there's thousands of little ships that are all flying in lanes and everything else. That took me a long time to get that to work. And it's like a 10-second shot. And if you look at the trailer for episode 1, you'll see this long shot of the Queen ship going past over Coruscant. And that was one of my shots. And Brian did the background, which was amazing. What's most impressive is the planet Matt, which Brian did. But I did the Queen ship and I did all the traffic. And those are all little particle systems, and it took me a long time to figure it all out. There's going to be some point where I give it like, here are 8, and I saw this back then. Here are 8 ships. I need you to randomly disperse them. They need to have these lanes. They need to have this thing. And we did this in, even in Star Wars. I would have, we couldn't. If you look at the camera droids inside of I called it the donut ship as the Imperial. I don't know what they called it, but we called it the donut ship. In the donut ship there was there's thousands of droids, and for some of the shots I put the droids in for those. And one of the things that you do is I got a whole bunch of droids. I have a particle system randomly filling the space with droids. I then tell it to start running. If you see something in front of you, run some other way. Don't run into each other. And so it's very, very simple, not really AI, but you can imagine how that kind of thing, fill this with 2,000 droids and have them shooting at each other. Pick 2 sides, have them firing at each other, throw them in, those kinds of things. And they did some of that in Massive, which is what Weta created for Lord of the Rings. They actually there was one where they're supposed to be reactive and do what they're supposed to do in the plant. So it's very early AI, and everyone ran. Like the elves ran, and they were like, "You can't do that. You have to fight." So anyway, so this kind of stuff I think is going to be really interesting as we start to fill in some of these gaps that are really hard to do well. I think that's where you're going to see a lot of this. And then the other thing is, I think there's a lot of things where you can. One of the things I found, I had to write a letter. It was long, and I don't write a lot of long letters. So I just said, here are the points I want to make. I gave it to ChatGPT. I said, write me a good letter this way, and it wrote a better letter than I would. Like it just because I don't write long letters, and so it just wrote this great letter, and I sent it away. What I can see is I want to say these things, but I want to say them as a doctor, or I want to say them as a lawyer, or I want to save them as a Green Beret, or whatever that, or Delta, or whatever it is. I want to say it that way, and the ChatGPT will help scriptwriters do that. That's why they didn't want to give up ChatGPT. They wanted to say that you can't replace this with ChatGPT, but they didn't want to give it up because their ability to have it figure stuff out for them is pretty good. So there's a lot of different places we're going to see it affect production. I don't know about requirements, but it's going to be everywhere from the writing of the scripts, improving the scripts, to also thinking about I was, I think I talked about this before, but I've been playing with this idea of people doing like safari hunting or whatever, but for dinosaurs. Like it's a, and so look at this guy, and he's got his gun, but he's like, the thing's about to go very horribly wrong for him. And so it's a much more dangerous thing to do. But that concept art would have taken somebody a week to paint. And then that would have only been one idea that had been done, and it would have been whatever. I made hundreds of these in 20 minutes and picked one that I liked. And so the thing is that concept art and being able to pitch ideas and pitch things is going to go to another level when we go through that. And also, if I went through here with Photoshop, I could get rid of all the foreground, and now I have a background that I could use for something. So, and I've already done that with some other things. So it's going to be I think still it's going to make it better. I know a lot of people are worried about it, but I think it's going to be better. Oh, by the way, I just saw it while I was doing this. We had a discussion yesterday about what tech this was, this tech here. So I tweeted it out. I was like, what is this? We couldn't figure it out during the show. We thought it was a transmitter. So we thought this was some kind of transmitter. It was going to be some kind of like wireless system or whatever. It's not. This is for drums. It's for the drum that he plays, and it locks into here. So he doesn't have to carry his drum around. He doesn't have to put it back over his head. So this is just a drum mount. And there was two people standing back there, and we couldn't figure out what they were doing. They are like the marching band drummers, and they have these rigs. And so there's nothing tech about it. Someone sent one on Twitter to me, and it's definitely what it is. So anyway, I just wanted to follow up from yesterday related to that. Next question.
Tim Snyder from Louisville, Kentucky. When back focusing on an Ursa Broadcast G2 with a Fujinon ENG lens, Fuji recommends a distance of around 10 feet, while Blackmagic recommends 70 feet. Who's right?
I don't know who's right, but I will tell you that I've never done 70 feet. Like, how would you even do that? Like, I don't even know how that would, I don't know what, maybe, but what I've done for the last 15 years is 10 feet. And I think, and I've learned it from people who did it for 20 years before me, 10 feet is generally what we do. It's a workable size. Like, I don't know how you, so by the way, so what you're probably wondering, some of you are wondering, what is back focus? So if you have a parafocal lens and you're a parfocal lens, you have a front focus and a back focus. You don't have this with still cameras because they can't do it. And so if a still camera, if you zoom in and out with your still camera, you can't zoom in and you can't zoom in, focus, and then slowly zoom back out. You'll lose the back focus. And so with these lenses, you can focus that back area so that no matter where you zoom in and out, you stay in focus in that process. So what we always do is you take the camera, well, the way we do it, we put a focus pattern, which is usually a circle with a bunch of little pies cut out, like every other slice of the pie cut out. So it'd be like 30 of those or 24 of those or whatever. And we set the lens, we measure it. There's a little, you probably don't, some of you know this, but if you're watching on a film camera, you'll see, on a still camera, you'll see that on the side of your camera somewhere. And that is the sensor position. If you're wondering what that little symbol is on your camera, that's telling you where the sensor is. So we measure from there. So we measure from the sensor out. We measure that out to 10 feet. We have the focus. We set the lens at 10 feet. That's why you do it. You set it so you have an integer number on the lens. It doesn't really matter. It could be 8 feet. It could be 16 feet. It doesn't really matter. Point is you set it at 10 feet. And then you focus it until it's perfectly sharp, and so you focus the back focus. It's a little dial on the back. It usually has a little tightening knob on it, and you tighten that, and then you usually test it a little bit, going back and forth. So you'll go, okay, and if I zoom in, if I zoom out, or if I zoom in, zoom out, it's still in focus. Because now you're zooming in and out, still at 10 feet focus, and am I staying in focus? And you might have to tweak it a little bit. You do that with every camera every time you put those lenses on. And sometimes you do it, if it's really cold or really warm, you might do it a couple times a day because it will breathe, the lens will breathe. And so you can do it by eye and always be doing it. But if you want to be doing those slow push-ins or you do those things, that back focus has to be in place. But I don't even know how you would do it at 70 feet. Like, I mean, I can see that being a theoretical idea, like, oh, it'd be better if it was at 70 feet because it's a longer arm, but I don't know how you would do that. So, and you know, in most cases when we're setting up cameras, and so that doesn't seem very practical. It might be more accurate. I'm not saying it isn't, but it's not a practical solution to actually.
What if
execute.
the room is 25 feet deep? You're kind of in trouble.
No, that's the problem. It's like, I mean, how many times do you have 70 feet where there aren't people walking between you? And like in a setup environment, I don't know how you would do that. So anyway, that'd be my only thing there. Next question.
Next one in from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. A follow-up to the autosave question. How do you make sure that project assets are also saved? Do you put the main project document in with the asset backups? And what do you include in the archive after delivery?
Go ahead, Mark.
So totally different industry, Roscoe. I understand that, but the workflow principles are pretty much the same. So I have people working in these large BIM models that have everything about a building in them. And they get very focused on that. So it's easy for them to forget to save every 20 minutes. So we rely on the autofocus, but only as a last resort to do a quick file recovery if something goes wrong. After that, after we do our saves every half an hour, every hour, those files get named. The name convention would be 4 digits for the year, 2 digits for the month, 2 digits for the day, a space or a hyphen, and then the hour and minute it was saved. So that gets all dumped into a file for that client's project. And then all of that gets archived and backed up to different servers in different places just so we can recover it if there's a disaster. But the convention's the same. We just create a project folder, and that has all the RFIs, all the submittals, all the emails, everything that goes along with that project.
Good, Ronnie.
Yeah, I guess this is for film or video projects, since the question is asked the way it is. And we keep a separate system for backing up all the source files. That's one of the things. And eventually it gets packed into one folder in the master backup that we spread out. And regarding the content that are being put into the archive, we normally get rid of most of the production pipeline stuff that are intermediate. And we use Frame.io, or has until now a lot, and where we put all the main source files that are being used, or we create a kind of long-term backup and archive that inside Frame.io to the cold storage, which is much cheaper. So that's how we do it, and I guess it's a good model.
Yeah, I mean, really thinking about where your assets are going to go and building something that someone can find later, and this is where naming conventions come in pretty useful. Is, a lot of times we think about naming conventions being the most general to the most specific. So it might be the client, their subclient, the project, the asset in that project, the version of that, roughly. And I usually shorten those all to 3 or 4 letter things, and they all stay the same. So if I have clients or a 4-letter code, they're all 4-letter codes. That way it sorts nicely when you look at it in an environment. And so those are, and we joke that's just the ILM naming convention. There's nothing new about it or revolutionary. It just is what it is. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
So the naming convention is really important because even today, Windows servers have a problem with file paths and names over 256 characters. And we get a report every night that goes through all of our projects and tell us which files are over that length, because it starts to have problems recalling those projects from backups if they're over a certain length of file characters.
Yeah, and that's why we shorten them to. That's why a lot of times we're shortening those characters to 4 per section to keep it underneath that requirement. We are going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about what we're talking about in the second hour. So if you've got suggestions of that, go ahead and throw them in there. Just a quick reminder that this is the year-end review. All week we'll be looking at what we did before last and what we're doing next. Tomorrow, today's lab, we've got a show workshop at noon Pacific Standard Time. That's 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so check that out if you want to be you want to learn how this all works. Wednesday, we have squares.tv at 10 a.m. And I'll be hanging out with Oliver at noon to talk about Memo Live. And now we're going to be talking about we'll talk about what we talked about. And so basically, the way this is broken up, and I think I have actually, hold on, let me see if I can show you kind of the, I'm kind of working on the format here so I can kind of show you, in a very, very simple way, kind of the way, I think a lot of people don't realize that we actually have a format to this. So as we think about it, but when you think about the daily format that we do for each one of these things, we have, if you look at it here, this is kind of the way the format works. And so basically you have, we have business here, and then we have GFX, and we have audio, video, and then, kind of infra. And then in each one of these, what we're doing is we've got these 4 things that we're covering. So we have a luminary coming in. We talk about a basic, a vendor, and a subject. And then what happens is that this is moving down like this. We're shifting them. And that way, there's only a couple times where you see 2 luminaries in 1 week. But in general, what happens is that you have, these, we're kind of going through different versions of each one of these verticals that we work on. So what we do is this is kind of the math that the councils work on. If you're interested in being the council, let us know. You can reach out to Josh for that. But each council is thinking about this. We're like, okay, what is the luminary for next month, or what is the subject for next month? And so we do have kind of a bit of a format that we're kind of working against as we start to put that together. And so what we want to do is we want to look back, about once a year, look back. What did we do last year? What did we like about last year? What did we maybe don't like about last year? You're more willing to put that in as well. And then also, what do we want to do next year? What are we interested in? And so each day this week, we'll be kind of talking about that. It's a little bit more than just brainstorming, but it is like brainstorming. So if you've got ideas of things that you want us to cover in graphics, go ahead and throw those in. And you can throw them in either through Makana, or you can throw them in using the QR code. You can go to askofficehours.global, and you can go ahead and put those suggestions in. So don't think about it as questions so much, but think about the suggestions of things you'd like us to talk about. And I think we have a way to, what we're going to do is we're going to show you everything that we did last year, so you can kind of remind you. And while you see this, try to think about what you would, try to think about the things that you would, that you really liked. Like, oh, I remember that one. That was great. And let us know. Throw it into Makana. Let's go ahead and roll the tape.
Canva and Keynote. Video Pencil and Squares TV apps. Playoff graphics. Time-lapse creation. Understanding alpha channels. Super Bowl ads and graphics. Matt Marion, Ross Dashboard. AI Midjourney. Lower thirds. Interview with Alan Hawks. Visual effects breakdown. Fundamentals of green screen. Super sources. NAB graphics. Blackmagic Unreal Engine integration. Office Hours HDR progress. Live camera and lens tracking for virtual production. Subdivision surfaces with Alan Hawks. USDZ in Motion and Final Cut. Typography with Kelsey Gray. Getting started with 3D printing. SPX, broadcast graphics with HTML. Broadcast graphics with presentation tools. 3D production, the overall pipeline. Photoshop generative imagery. Raster versus vector cage match. 3D production idea. SIGGRAPH wrap-up. iPhone LiDAR for photogrammetry and Unreal Engine. Stu Maschwitz. Sketching in 3D the Feather app. Super sources. USDZ and Apple Keynote in Pages. Midjourney update. SPX graphics for Zoom. Lower thirds. Eric Geisler. Lab countdown clock. 3D graphics starter. The Apple event breakdown. Lab Apple Motion lower thirds. Lab Apple Motion Lower Thirds Part 2. Graphics Tuesday with Alex Goldner.
So there you go. That's what we did. It seems like we did so much more, but then you're like, okay, well, that's the list. That's the list because that's that one day. So you get 50 of them or so that we covered there. And so the question for all of you looking at it is first, in this first part of the discussion is, and we can mix it up a little bit. So I'm not worried about whether it's you're putting a suggestion for next year or a retrospect of what you liked last year. Just kind of mix it up, but let us know which ones of those that what did you like? What did you think was really great? And also, what would you like to see more of as we go into next year? So this is still a little bit of a retrospective of looking at the things we liked, but it's also looking forward into the things that you want to see more as it relates to graphics. Let's go ahead and jump into the first suggestion or question.
Yeah, first one coming in from Zach.
Okay, go ahead. Anyway, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, Zach Stallsmith from Chautauqua, New York. Can we get a quick reminder about understanding alpha channels? Specifically, I'm wanting to output my OBS program via NDI and only have the content set out without the black background. Is alpha channel the best workflow to send videos and words? Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's a good one. And I think that, again, we're not answering specific questions, but we're really talking about the what we might cover. And I think from a coverage perspective, I think that's a great suggestion. And I do think that we could, instead of talking necessarily about, trying to figure out what happened to my notes. Instead of talking about the alpha channels, I think that there's probably a second hour that we haven't done where we kind of break that all. But what is keying? And talking about the different styles of keying. So there's Luma keying, which is what you do when you send it just over black. There's reasons that you do that. There's green screen keying. There's chroma keying. So that's green screen keying. There's a couple versions of that. There is, and then there's alpha channels that are gonna come in. And I think that talking about the different ways to pull keys, I think would be a useful one. And I think there's a couple different places to do that. There's live graphics, but there's also how do we pull keys? I mean, I think that keying in general could be a really interesting subject in the sense that it's really important for us to separate things out. And we do it in one way in Photoshop. We do it another way when we're doing live graphics, but we also do it another way when we are doing film work. Film work is a mixture sometimes of green screen, sometimes of rotoscoping. We haven't really covered rotoscoping, and we could bring somebody on to talk about rotoscoping. So I think that rotoscoping could be another. It's something that we do use fairly often. So that could be a really interesting one. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
And what might relate to that is how do you distribute files with alpha channels in them? In the old days, we used to use the animation codec. Remember that, Alex? Nowadays, it's the 4444 ProRes to be able to do that. So you need to have that included.
Yeah, and I think, as we talk about it, what file formats support what things. Yeah, because animation was definitely something we used a lot, but now we use ProRes, or we use, again, like for instance, we use TGA files for some of the stuff, and ping files, and and sequences versus video. So yeah, go ahead, Ronnie.
I can't answer specifically to this question, as you already mentioned. We are probably not suited up to do that, but there have been some technology developments the last year in 2023, especially the things that you can do in DaVinci for making things like what you call it, rotoscoping, much easier. There are very, very many functions inside DaVinci that are not being known by the normal people that obviously could use this.
Yeah, a lot of the AI or machine learning or whatever they want to call it to do intelligent matte removal, or intelligent matte creation is pretty interesting. And I think Resolve's doing it. I think Premiere and After Effects have their own tools to do that. Photoshop does a little bit of that. So I think that and I do think that one thing that kind of makes me think about as it relates to this is that there's a whole series there that wants to be had, which is kind of an overview of how it works. And then the rest of the year, we go through, every quarter, let's say, we go through different ways that we're managing those keys. in different processes. Because there's even, for instance, one version of keying is I want to interact with a 3D object. So now I have to export from Cinema 4D or other things matte holdout mats, that are gonna be like, I want to walk between this 3D object and another 3D object. Now I'm not rendering that 3D scene. I'm rendering the foreground and the background, or I'm rendering or I'm rendering it all together. But I'm actually I'm rendering out a separate mat for a specific object so that it'll interact with the real world. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
And the different methodologies out there for doing rotoscoping. For example, I love Mocha Pro. That's a planar tracking system. It's totally different than most other things that you see out there. It's very accurate, and there's all kinds of methodology within that to accomplish different things. But if you want to do something super simple, you can use the brush mode in After Effects. Not great, but if you just want to put text behind something, boom.
And again, I think the subject, though, I want to try to corral us into just we're brainstorming. We won't talk about any solutions right now, but I think that thinking about how those things work would be great. Let's jump into the next suggestion.
Next suggestion from Ronny Hafsoy from Tromsø, Norway, and here in our panel. Could you elaborate on the key trends in graphic design and technology that emerged in 2023? Additionally, how do you assess the efforts of establishing software companies and updating and reinventing their products in the face of continuous innovation?
Yeah, I think that's a great subject. I think a January subject for key trends might be something that we do across the board. Like, what are we seeing in business? What are we seeing in graphics? What are we seeing in audio and video? I think those are probably good kickoff solutions. I didn't really think about that, but I think that's for each vertical. You'll hear me typing because I'm actually making sure that I can come back and watch the movie, but it's easier if I write it down. Go ahead, Ronny.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to just have a look back in the last year and see what trends has changed, and especially what we are focusing in our studio is what are the big old companies doing to renew themselves. How are they competing now? We see companies like Adobe and Microsoft, of course, etc., trying to get on the wagon and be a part of the game. And they have big bank accounts, so they should actually be discussed deeper and what they're doing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that Adobe, I think it's doing better in some places than others. I think that they are. A good example is but I think you're right. Like looking at these big companies and trying to figure that out. There's some things that they're just not, and it's interesting because on a really big company, it'll be hit and miss. So like Premiere, I don't think is progressing very fast for Adobe or in ways that we really need it, but their Substance work and the Photoshop work is amazing. So looking at like where are they doing well and where are they and what are the challenges and so on and so forth. I think that's a great one of just looking at how these companies are paying attention to it. It's hard to tell whether that's GFX or business, but I think that it's a great subject. Yeah. Next suggestion.
Ken Jones, Seattle, Washington, with a suggestion for the future. Pick any topic and start from zero for the new arrivals in the trade.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the basics are designed for. And a lot of times we'll come back to some subjects again or in more detail or a slightly different angle. So if you look back at the what I was talking about before is kind of this format that we're using here. Inside of it, you'll see every month in every subject we have a basic in there. And the goal is to kind of go back to things that we should be talking about in detail that we feel like you have to know, and answer questions related to those. And then the subject is more of so for instance, we might talk about what a basic might be. What is HDR? A subject will be the Thursday Night Football team coming in and showing how they use HDR. That's a whole, like if you're a beginner, like we have to do the basic before we do that one so that you have some idea which way is up, and then we're going to show you what up looks like. So that's definitely the 1-2 punch that we're trying to kind of figure out there. Next question.
Next one in from Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada. I'm a big fan of time-lapse. Can we follow up with more practical uses of time-lapse?
I think that there's a couple of different things there. One is the different uses of time lapse, which I love, by the way, but also how we do time lapse, because a lot of people do time lapse in very different ways. And why do we do time lapse in different ways? So, for instance, if I have a really long time lapse, I will often do, every 1 second or every 5 seconds or something like that, because I don't want to, I've got battery and storage and all kinds of other issues. If I'm doing a short one, I shoot it with video so that I can do better motion blur. And so, but why do we make and when I say short, less than 4 hours kind of thing. But that's a good example of something that I used to do with big cameras and then GoPros and now iPhones, to do a lot of these things, and why you might want to shoot really high resolution. I have some folks that shoot 8K time lapse because you can now push in on them and so on and so forth. So talking about some of those techniques, I think, would be really useful. It's a great suggestion and a perfect one for this day. So yeah, techniques and time lapse would be great. And there might be, I'm trying to think of some overall arching ones. One of the things that we're thinking about, and when we think about this format, is to think about not only we're going through this subject, but we're thinking about right now, how do we slice these subjects up, if you think about it this way, into 3 verticals. So like graphics might be 2D graphics, and it might be 3D graphics, and it might be wild card, right? And that might be the kind of thing that we're doing there, so that way in every quarter, we do a little bit of this, little bit of this, little bit of this, so that we keep on getting different variety, as we kind of work through it. And I think that kind of for this graphics, one of the trends could be kind of artistic uses of it, like time lapse, like out of the box uses of graphics could be an interesting one. Next question.
Robert Linkrum from Belmont Shore, California. I usually can't attend midday after-hours events, especially the events that have graphics instruction. Could these events be officially recorded and viewable later on YouTube?
Go ahead, Mark.
So I'm not sure it's the best idea to record the actual working out of a scenario like this. But I think that after we collect a couple of them, or we have a couple of good events, they get listed somewhere to follow up with an event that's really well recorded.
Yeah, so we're going to make a distinction between, you're going to see something, and it took us a little while to figure this out. So it's confusing right now because we said labs, but Josh and some other folks have corrected me, like, hey, we have to have a distinction between what we're recording, what we're not recording, what's in after hours, and what's being part of the show. We started playing with this idea of doing, this kind of labish kind of thing where I'm doing like what I've been doing with Alex Gollner as a test at the end of this year. And we think it's important to record it. We're not sure if it fits into the second hour. So this has been kind of our, like the second hour might want to be a little bit more tight with a little bit more discussion. So what we're looking at doing is creating a whole new kind of piece of content that's probably not at the third hour, probably not contiguous, but it's going to be another place somewhere, which are what we call workshops. And the workshops will be recorded and broadcasted the way we do the show. They will not require, what I'm working on is a pipeline that doesn't require necessarily the whole office hours system to turn on for those workshops. It's just something that's 2 people or 3 people getting together and doing a workshop. We're going to record it and broadcast it, still take your questions, still broadcast it. The reason that we're not necessarily taking the after hour stuff that way is because we have people coming in that can't do that. They come in and hang out. And what we want to do is keep that there. But for people who don't mind having it recorded, or things that we don't mind recording and posting, we may start to move those into something that can be recorded. And there's some things that are done every week. Like, so instance, if you think about we have the show workshop, which is now confusing because we have to play with that name. Anyway, but the show lab that is done every week, it wouldn't make sense to record that every week. Like, it doesn't make sense to record that every week. What makes sense is to just do it. And that's where, because it's an experience. And there's a lot of things in after hours that would be an experience. But, we're not going to do it this week because I'm not technically prepared for it. But like the discussion I have with Oliver would probably make sense to record and post in the future, that I'm going to do it at noon. And, because it is a because it's something that people will want later. You know, I'm doing it this week because I feel like a lot of people have a little extra time to jump in for this week, you know, alone. But I think in the future we'll look at those kinds of workshops, recording those and posting those so that, and we did something that was similar to that on Saturdays. You know, Saturday, for those of you who are, for the OGs, don't know this, but if you're newer, there used to be what we called the long day, and that would start show, and then we take a little time off, and then we would go until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon with multiple things, and those were all recorded. If you go back and look on Saturdays, the long day was a lot of these workshops all smashed into Saturday and took up most of Saturday. And so we may go back to doing some of these workshops on weekends in the afternoon or something like that. We'll see when we do it. Because and again, we can have multiple people do them. If I do them on most weeks, it'll be during the weekends rather than during the weekday. I can't add more time to what I'm doing now. Yeah, go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, I totally agree. Some of the workshops or kind of longer type of content that are not prepared for kind of being the second hour could benefit from having a few of those after work or after hours. Prepare, and then you can extract all the necessary information and make a second hour of it.
Yeah, and I think that we look at that a lot. Like, hey, we'll do a lab, and then we'll do something on the second hour. But I do think that the second hour, I think that we wanted to play with it, the idea of the lab, to see what it looked like. You know, sometimes you just have to do something to figure it out. And so you'll see us do this in the shows and just try to figure it out. But what we found was that and this has to do with, you know, I look at a lot of like dwell time and how long people do it and the curves and everything else in Photoshop or in YouTube. And what we saw in the labs was that for the most part, what would happen is you see this fade that happened in it because, you know, we're just kind of digging into things and everything else. And so I realized, well, that's probably not for everyone. And the problem is it's not as discussion driven as some of the other stuff. So having like doing a lab, and to get back to this, doing a lab might be something we do. Doing a workshop on 1 week and then doing a discussion about that subject on the next week or 2 weeks later or something could make a lot of sense, because you see us just kind of, for those of you who want to watch us do it, you can ask some of those questions, but afterwards you might have more questions. You know, and with these workshops, what we want to do is we also want to think about how to engage you in playing with it. So we might say, you know, we're going to talk about a bunch of things. Here are some assets, and then we might even create a little short VOD where Alex Gollner, for instance, shows you the basic structure of, here, I'm going to build a lower third. And it's like, if you look at what Chris Fenwick did or what I did that's on our YouTube page, what you saw are 2 short videos that show you how to do something that you could probably just go do, right? You just grab these things. And what we want to do is do more where we have those assets. Here's a 2-minute video or an 8-minute video. Watch this. And then we're going to do a lab like we did with Chris. But that, again, I think that I have agreed over time. I was a little argumentative about it at the beginning. He was like, oh, I really want to do this in the second hours. But I've agreed over time with people like Mitchell, who's like, hey, this doesn't belong in the second hour. so anyway, so at first I was like, well, this is what I want to do. Over time, I saw that it was probably something that we should just build into its own product, you know, its own output that we do. But if you look at it, it's kind of like I'm going to give you something to play with, and then we're going to workshop it. And if you were smart, you played with it, and then the workshop's going to be more valuable to you. Now, here's the secret. The workshop's more valuable to everyone if only a few people play with the original assets. Because this is what we've learned with shows, is that if only 10 or 15% of the people watch all the pre-show records, and we just open up to Q&A, everyone benefits because they'll ask better questions and more questions. They benefit the most. So we can, so we could build this kind of, you know, it's again a little bit of a classroom environment, and then we still have another one, a subject that's a second hour that people who didn't go to the workshop or didn't watch the workshop or whatever can kind of almost, you know, get the cliff notes of answering, you know, asking questions and answering questions. And people might have, after the workshop, known more, played with it more, asked more questions, you know, and so we kind of wrap it up with that. So there's I think a curve there that we can create that would, you know, because we're always trying to, you know, secretly or not so secretly trying to build the next generation of classrooms. So with what we're doing, we just have only started with the most basic version, and we slowly build the rest of it out. Go ahead, Mark.
And I was just going to add on to what you had just said, was that, you really don't develop the questions that you have after watching the video. It's after watching the video and then trying to recreate what's on the video that you find all these little steps that the video maybe didn't do a great job of covering. So then they become part of the next generation, which is asking the questions in front of everybody as a group.
Yeah, I have to say, when you watch us do stuff, as much as you can, there's some things that we're using, that we're showing that are really expensive and hard to use and everything else. But I just have to say that operational knowledge of something is so much more valuable than theoretical knowledge. I will say this over and over and over again, and I know that this is almost a Sunday thing, but as we think about these subjects, theoretical knowledge, especially in a trade, when we're a trade, is almost more dangerous than no knowledge at all. And it could be argued that it's actually more dangerous than no knowledge at all. Like reading something and thinking that you know how to do it is you make a bunch of decisions that aren't based in reality. You are interacting with the construct and not the what's actually so, and super dangerous. And so when you see things that we're doing that are in the area that you're in, what we want to do is keep on providing people the opportunity to play along and work on those things, and then come up with questions that are based in reality, not in what you read, so that you don't just have a bunch of ideas, you actually have knowledge, and we fill those pieces in. Next question.
Robert Shoji from Los Angeles, motion tutorials that result in a practical, usable storytelling graphic.
Yeah, we're going to do a lot more motion. We won't do it as often as we did it here. The motion tutorials are, we're going to be doing those probably at least once a quarter. We'll talk about motion, maybe more often, but we'll see how that looks. But at least once a quarter, we're going to talk about it. And the reason for that is that it's a $50 application on a Mac, and it's and folks are like, why are we doing a lot of Mac? 80% of our viewership is Mac. so there's if it gets 50-50, we'll do more. We still cover PCs. We still talk about Melees. We still do, we still cover those things. But if you're wondering, like, why does Apple, we think about it, it's a huge portion of our viewership. But it's a $50 application, which is super powerful, and almost nobody knows how to use it. And it's kind of, to me, it's, as someone who's been using it since version 1, it's kind of stunning. I couldn't remember whether we did all the shots, but I asked Kevin Hansen and confirmed we did a feature film, and we did 207 visual effect shots. Some of them are pretty complicated. I've shown it, and I think we showed it in the last one, all in motion. I think that was all done in motion. And so, and the reason we did that was because the motion with Conduit, which we had a plugin for at the time, was like having like a little mini flame, because this was in 2008. And you could just watch it loop while you did all the stuff you were doing. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I was going to say that it's hard to teach how to use motion. It's better to show tutorials for a specific use case that people might want to have, because it's way too broad a subject to teach how to use motion in a second hour.
In general, what I really want to focus on is more and more training that is very specific to a thing. Like here is, one of the things I've been collecting is enough data. I've got a LiDAR, and I've got some cameras, and I've got some stuff. When we start doing a bunch of this stuff in the future, I'm working on a partnership with someone I know, to be able to put the assets up. Right now, we can't afford to put the assets up at the moment, because it would be expensive if you all started downloading them. And so I'm working with a CDN to be able to make that happen. And so if that turns out to be the case, then we can put those up, and then we can say, here are all the assets that we're going to talk about, and then you can play with those assets on your own, and that's going to help, but it's, to your point, Mitchell, I totally agree with all things, not just with, I can teach you how to use a jigsaw, but it's not that useful until you have to actually make something with it. Now you're going to learn, that's what makes Cindy Drozda's work so interesting, is she has things that she's doing particularly well, and showing how to do it along with it, I think, is really important. And so, and it's easier because not all of us can have a lathe. Although I'm thinking of getting one just because of Cindy, because I just want to I just want to learn how to. I loved a lathe when I was growing up, and wood lathe specifically, and metal lathe, and I want to learn it again. So the idea is that how do we do that? But to your point, having a specific need, making a bowl or making this or making that. It's one thing to learn how to use a lathe. It's another thing to actually do it and then figure out all the problems that are there. By the way, the secret to that, by the way, is not just to do it for yourself if you're learning, to do it for somebody else, because they'll ask you to do things that are uncomfortable that you don't know how to do. And if you do it for yourself, you will tend to stop. Like, you don't know how to do that, so you just don't do it. Whereas someone goes, well, but that's what I want. And you're like, okay. then you go through a lot of pain. Next question.
Chris Sabato from Albany, Oregon. Data-driven graphics, populating broadcast graphics from CSV, JSON, Google Sheets, etc.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, this is a very powerful thing. And by the way, Chris is an expert at it because I've seen him do magical things with it. But basically what it does is allows your graphics to consume an external database. Could be XML, JSON, as he said. That's very sophisticated and an excellent feather in your cap or quill in your quiver to be able to do that, because that's the best way. Instead of typing out hundreds of different lower thirds, it's better to have it pulled off.
You can pull it off, but it's also scoreboard data, like that kind of thing, and how does that work? Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, totally agree. This is really important for us as a company as well. We have a lot of corporate clients that are still using the old PowerPoint slides with a lot of numbers and tables, and we would love to see if we can transform that into pictures, for example, using Midjourney or ChatGPT or something that actually add value to the presentation as an image instead of just, old plain tables.
And those are two different subjects, which is great. So one is like live data-driven graphics, like what Chris Sabato does and what he's probably thinking about when he does that. Another one is taking data and making it look interesting. And there's a whole, like that definitely is, I can't think of his name right now. There's a Tufte. Edward Tufte has a whole seminar that's just based on, I took it, I have the books. And so about visualizing data and what makes that useful, not just what it makes it look pretty, but what makes it useful and makes it easy to understand and so on and so forth. So I think that those are two different subjects that both of which we should do this year. Next question.
Ronnie Hofsøy from Tromsø, Norway, right here on our panel. How has the integration of advanced graphics technologies, such as augmented reality and virtual reality, influenced broadcast media in 2023? And what impact do you foresee these technologies having on future broadcasting trends?
Good, Mark.
This is such a great topic, especially now. I mean, I know augmented reality and virtual reality aren't necessarily new, but the equipment is finally just getting to the point where we can use it in business and still get some return on investment. And so the changes over this next few years are going to be dramatic, and it's really going to be hard to stay on top of everything as it changes so quickly.
As we thought about those verticals that we talked about, 2D and 3D, most likely AR immersive will be the third one, the third leg that we do there. And the reason for that is that it's so, we're about to see a huge cage match between Meta and Apple. And it's going to be, as producers, I think the mistake people make is that they go, well, I don't think this is going to be anywhere in 5 years. Who cares? It's going to be here right now. There's work to be done. I have made so much money, not me, but my companies have made so much money riding waves that eventually hit the ground. But while you're on them, you're getting paid to do that thing. I've done a lot of spherical and HDR and AR and VR and everything else, and I got to learn a lot on somebody else's dime. And I'm excited about it. I think that I have seen things that I know will be exciting to use. So I think that I personally think that these have a long shelf life, and I think that we're just about to see the beginning. But in the end, caring about whether it's going to be here in 10 years or 5 years as a media producer is a mistake. Like you can just take it on right now and get there and take advantage of the fact that there's not that many people around to do it, and you're one of the few. Next question.
Josh Kaufman from Pittsburgh, PA. The second hour on the Feather app was a fantastic display of showing a complex workflow, and I believe our Q&A coverage of this vendor was very well done.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. So Feather is a really interesting example, and I think something you'll see more of across all of these is that, we were at a conference, we were covering a conference, and that's one place you get to see this thing. I would have never found Feather had I would have never seen Feather if I had just read it on the internet. Like, it wouldn't have made any sense. What made a difference was we were at SIGGRAPH, and they had a big booth, and I was just in awe of this app. And so I was like, oh, this is something we have to cover. So we covered it a little bit at the conference, and then we brought them onto the show. And that's a pattern that I want to continue. So if we're covering NAMM or we're covering NAB or we're covering other things like that, the idea is that we're going to go and you'll see us talk about something in passing, but then we're going to dig into it a little bit later, and produce a whole hour on something. So, so stay tuned for more of that. Yeah, go Ronnie.
Yeah, and she made a really good presentation as well. So she was obviously trained in doing these demos.
Yeah.
And that is also important to vet all those coming on so that we know that the content they are providing and the way they are presenting is really high quality.
The whole company really took it seriously, and that was really it was really great. Next question.
Talaluk Lopez Waterman in Bensberg, Germany. Unreal Engine and how the community is using it in different ways for their particular verticals.
Yeah, we need to do a lot more Unreal, and Nick is ready to do more of that. And I think we were just kind of juggling things with. We had Nick kind of lined up for some of those things, and then we had to do this shift of our gear and our setup and everything else, and that kind of created some chaos. And now we're kind of coming back to it. So I think that, I think we're getting closer. Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, we're doing some specific things with Zoom and see if we can get to that. So, yeah, I think it's really important to get running with those guys as well.
You will see us talking about. I think they showed in. They showed at Zoomtopia, Zoom, using Unreal and tying directly into Unreal. So you're definitely going to see. There'll definitely be at least one session that we dedicate completely to Unreal or Zoom inside of Unreal because it's super exciting. So stay tuned for more of that. Next question.
Bobby Rafferty in Central Florida. I'd like to see continuing education topics on digital content creation software with OpenUSD USDZ workflow.
Yeah, USDZ you can definitely expect to see us talk about at least a couple times a year because it's going to be a bigger and bigger deal. I admit that I get a little frustrated when I see someone else. I think Adobe or someone else started doing GLB or whatever, and I was like, I mean, can we all just agree on one format? We don't have to keep on doing all these other formats. So much of the industry has already gone to USD, not necessarily USDZ, but USD has been like, hey, we all agreed on this. And then Adobe was like, no, I want to do something else. You're just like, come on. So anyway, next question.
Douglas Carmichael, starting out in Unreal Engine.
Yeah, Unreal Engine. And I think starting out, this gets into where we might think about doing kind of a lab-like, or a workshop kind of thing, where there's, we kind of dig through it. I think that the challenge, we've done some Unreal getting started with Nick. The problem is that it's hard to watch and understand what's going on. You really just have to do it. And so I think that there's a place for a lab in after hours. There's a place for a workshop where we talk about it. There's a place for second hour where we're talking about just what is Unreal. And those things are definitely going to be, as we go into those basics, that's definitely going to be something that we cover. Next suggestion.
Josh Kaufman from Pittsburgh, PA suggests typography with Kelsey Gray was an excellent example of a luminary show done well. Great presentation, and the host and guest interaction really worked to get the most out of this expert because of the research the host invested.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I agree 100%. It was fascinating and interesting to watch. Fonts is a little pet peeve or pet project of mine. It's a supportive thing that's small, but has such a big impact on so many different things. So I think more things like this would be great for us to embrace.
Yeah, and I think sometimes there is a temptation to, we're so dealing with video and 3D and everything else, is not to really deal with the basics, and I think that topography is definitely one of those. We just got into it, talk, and I think that we definitely want to see if we can bring Kelsey back on. She was, and just so you know how that happens is I have a lot of books on topography, and I reached out to her just because I found her contact on the book and said, "Hey, I really love your book, and I'd love to, bring you on the show." And she said yes. Like that's a lot of these are just kind of. And I did, by the way, ping other people like, "Oh, let's talk about topography," and they're like, they were more prickly, and she was fantastic, and I think that having a couple more rounds of that, and that gets into another place where potentially a workshop or a lab of actually opening up some topography, font lab, or other things like that to dig into it would be really fun as well, to learn how to build fonts, and. Again, why would you do that is because, when you really understand these basics, I think we all do our work better. We understand, like, if we put up a 3D text and an art designer will look and go, well, the kerning isn't very good. A 3D artist may not even think about the kerning, like, oh, it looked cool. And they're like, well, what about the space between the E and the T? And it'd be nice if we tighten that up a little bit. And you go through and individually, change the spacing for every letter. Those are things you don't notice, except I notice. Like, I can tell you, like, I look at someone's graphics and I'll tell you whether someone went through and, actually paid attention or not, because the way it comes out, you can do it in text. Like, the body of the text is fine. But when you're doing display art, you start to have to really tune all those things up to make it work. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I got a big education in that back in the day of the Chiron, is if it was a really good Chiron operator, there was a lot of clicking going on, because they were kerning pairs and doing things important.
And I think that those are, showing people what that looks like. Because again, these are really basics that it's challenging, especially if you didn't go to art school, you won't see those things. Like, if this is where, I talk a lot about the need for, functional knowledge, operational knowledge as opposed to theoretical. But sometimes you have to go back and understand what the theory is behind it. You just understand it a lot more once you've done it. And that's the thing that we want to kind of play with. Yeah. Next suggestion.
Suggestion from Talalik Lopez Waterman in Bensberg, Germany still. I'd like to very respectively present an opposing opinion. Labs in the second hours, or at least on YouTube, please.
Right. So what we're talking about right now, and you guys, and keep on throwing things in because we're always making something up here, is that have these workshops that are basically labs. But the idea is the lab might last for many, many hours, and it may be and it may be us just kind of hacking together and so on and so forth. But for things that we want to record, we might call them workshops, change their name to a workshop, and we do record them, and they're not done necessarily in the lab. They're not really done as just a raw lab, but they're also not done as a, I don't think that we necessarily have it. Once we start recording it, we probably wouldn't have just a meeting with a bunch of people in it. What we'd probably do is have, the people that are going to be talking in one thing, people watching and interacting with it and, being able to talk through it. But it's much slower, and we record it and we put it on YouTube. It's another piece of content there. I want to make sure that we're capable of doing them, without a lot of overhead. So we're going to try to think about what that looks like. And then go from there. Yeah. Next question.
Pedro G. Gonzalez III in Oklahoma City. How about doing a lab on how to make graphics that flash on the screen when you hit 5,000 subscribers on YouTube? It can include a link to the winner of that FX3.
I see what you did there. Just slipping it in. We did reach 5,000 followers on YouTube. That was on a Sunday, I think in January of last year. We said, hey, we're going to try to hit 5,000 somewhere. And, it seemed like a reasonable number. And then we got to the end, and I thought for sure we'd get the number. then we were getting to the last couple of weeks. I'm like, oh, it's really going to be close. And so I started actually pandering a little bit, which I try not to do, to like, hey, subscribe if you're not subscribed so that we can get to 5,000. But we made 5,000 yesterday. So we've made our goal. Next year, our goal is 50,000. So we're going to try to, so you'll see us kind of changing structure as we try to expand. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
I had a real nice talk with him on After Hours last night. And Pedro is also the guy that suggested the prize, the FX3, the lens, some lighting, some other stuff. And I said, I don't know who's going to do that, but if they took the 5,000 people that subscribe to YouTube, if each of them gave $1, I could get you to the FX3.
There you go. Yeah, budget. We don't have any. If Sony gives us an FX3 to give away as a prize, then we're there. Next question.
Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada. Is color theory a subject for Graphics Day?
Yeah, I think it's always like, do we put color into Thursday or Tuesday? And I think we put it into Tuesday. Like I think that, but it could go either way. You might see color corrections show up in Thursday. We should talk about that, but it also is a bit of a graphics thing as well. So it's very complicated. When we just are doing color, just basic LUTs and so on and so forth, that might be a Thursday session. When we start talking about power windows and mats and things like that, that might be a Tuesday. So it could go either direction. But we definitely need to keep on talking about color theory. Now, we had some great Saturday sessions, I think, with Ray Maxwell talking about color theory in the past, and we might try to bring Ray back in and talk about it a little bit. He had some great examples there. So we'll definitely, it's another one of those basics that I think everybody needs to know. Next suggestion.
Sam Reed in Maine, +1 to Talalek's input about labs in the second hours, or at least on YouTube. I'd go one further. Any labs training basics days can ditch the first hour general question and answer, make it 1 hour of tightly focused training, and then 1 hour of focused questions, general questions if time allows.
Yeah, I'm pretty religious about the 1 hour of Q&A, and here's why: is that I really feel like and I got to check something here real quickly. I just want to make sure. I told people we would use the QR code, and then I just got into the conversation here. I just want to make sure we don't have any. No, I think that's a different. That's probably for tomorrow. One of the things I'm dedicated to with this is I really feel like we are a resource that every day, if you have something you're trying to solve, we'll at least give it a shot. I can't claim that every day we're going to have the perfect answer for you, but we do a pretty good job. And it's sometimes better than trying to search every video on YouTube done by folks that oftentimes aren't as accurate as I'd like them to be. I'm not going to claim that we're always 100% accurate, but we're going to at least, we've got some folks that have done this before. They're going to do the best they can to at least give you some pointers, at least pointing you in the right direction most of the time. So I think that that's important. I think that if we reduce the number of times we were available for that, we're already pushing questions back now. We push a couple questions back every hour. As we expand, it's going to get a lot worse. We'll be pushing half the questions back because we don't get to them. So there's more of an argument to doing more general Q&A, because I feel like what's happening is we're answering real questions for real people about real things that they're thinking about. And I think that's, to me, it's always been the most important piece of the puzzle, is to do that. And that's what we did the first week. We didn't have second hours until 6 months in, and so anyway, and we made them second hours because we were just doing one. Like when office hours started, it was just 1 hour. Like we just did an hour of Q&A, and then we went on our merry way. And then we added the second hours to it. But when we do second hours, a lot of times those fill up as well. And so we always want to make sure that we're there as a service, and then we add these other hours to, there are things we should cover and figure out and so on and so forth. And so, but I do agree with you that putting these on YouTube makes sense. I mean, I've really been thinking about this for the last half year, of that we should take some of the labs and put them on. It's just that not all of them. Sometimes either a vendor can speak more freely when not on air, or we bring people in that can't talk, or we can't, there's a lot of idiosyncrasies about that. that I want to leave the labs the way they are because, for instance, I'm probably less likely, like a lab, we can go into a meeting room and everyone can just sit there and talk amongst themselves, right? You can have 10 people or 20 people and they just start talking and doing. I'm not going to put that on YouTube. I'm just letting you know, like I'm too risk adverse to just like have, 15 people on random access and having them talk on air is probably not something that it's just too many risks there for me. So it's always going to be a little bit more vertical, but still taking Q&A and still live and still having people bring those things in. So we're going to, it's kind of halfway between a second hour and a lab is where the workshops are probably going to land. But I do think that we should record them, and I do think that some of them, and again, some of the labs, I think, especially ones that are done every week, they're more just open Q&As, and I kind of want to keep the informal nature of them. I don't want them to become a show, but I think the workshops are kind of a looser show than the second hour. Next question.
Ronnie Hofsøy from Tromsø, Norway. What about the automation, both for our small home studios, but also in a studio for events as an integration glue between all our gadgets and services? Yeah,
I would say that as we go into automation, that's really a Friday subject. That's kind of the infrastructure logistics subject. So as we go into automation for those things, between all the gadgets and services, that usually falls on a Friday, but you can't talk enough about it because it really does make a lot of things work a lot better. So yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Josh Kaufman from Pittsburgh, PA suggests Stu Mashevitz, Eric Geisler, Alan Hawks were great graphics luminaires for 2023. Who should we interview for 2024?
Oh man, we're gonna try. We're gonna see who we can invite. But I've got a couple of people on the target list. But let us know what you think as far as about who you want to have on. But we have some great folks related to graphics and visual effects and so on and so forth that we're going to invite on, and we'll see who shows up. So I don't want to say it on a record, but pretty excited about the luminaries that we're at least targeting to talk to. Next question or suggestion.
From Ronnie Hofsøy from Tromsø, Norway. Could we have a small section that sums up the last week in graphics every Tuesday, like a short banter about last week's finds?
Yeah, I like that. I think that would actually be. I've been trying to think about where to put that. I'm trying to figure out where to put that kind of thing, like news. Like these were released. Like when we talk about video, DJI released a new drone, or someone released in audio. It might be that somebody released a new microphone or whatever. But having that at the top of the hour just to kind of kick it off. I think I probably would not. The question is, where do you put that? And maybe you put it at the end of the first hour rather than the beginning. The reason I'm sensitive to it is I want to make sure that the second hour just feels clean. Like we're about to start cutting the second hour separately. And so when we do that, we want that one to just feel like if you came to watch the thing that it says on the thumbnail, you get that immediately. But I think that we could extend, one of the things we've been looking at is doing at the bottom of the hour. So what we're trying to build, a little bit more inside baseball, but usually a Sunday discussion. But we're trying to build a setup where we the bottom of the hour goes into about 3 minutes of announcements of new things, right? New things, and the top of the hour goes into 2 or 3 minutes of that. The reason we're doing that is because we are over this year going to be really aggressively looking at broadcasting this and making it available to TV networks and TV stations and radio and everything else. That's part of why you're seeing this hard format that we're kind of building, is because we want to get out at certain very, very precise times so that we can. Now, what we don't want to do is necessarily run ads, but we want to make sure that we have spaces for ads for our partners. And so so you're going to see us kind of add some of those things in. We want to make sure that those are valuable to. Now, we may eventually, if we're lucky, we might have some sponsors that help offset some of the costs of what we're doing. But our primary interest is doing that. Sorry, I was trying to show something. Oh, anyway, yeah. So So there you go. Something to think about there. Let's see if we got. I move some windows around. I apologize if I have a lot of windows and I get lost in them sometimes. I thought I'd show, just because it's the day after Christmas. I make Christmas cards, and sometimes I send them out and sometimes I don't, but I thought people might enjoy some of my Santa Christmas cards since we have a couple of extra minutes. But this was Santa, in a podcast, doing his thing. You have Santa doing comms. So there's, that, which I thought was pretty good. I felt like this was really Santa after the next day. He's traveled thousands of miles. He's just kind of hanging out with Donner, I think. Again, I don't think he knows how to use
Donder,
that.
by the way, not Donner.
Yeah, there we go. And I thought that was a fun one. If I was going to send a postcard out, like, you don't really see a lot of great ones where he's in the sky, like with the gifts and everything else. But I thought that was a really fun one. I actually put the thing on. I think I sent it to my sister. Of him taking some photos. Never thought of Santa as a photographer, but there you go. This is his upgraded sleigh. You can see it's a little more of a jet fighter look, for him doing his thing. This is a more meditative Santa. He finishes it, or I can't decide whether it happens before or after. And there's another one that's more of a Zen Santa, which I thought was kind of fun. Another one that's more classic postcard. These were all done in Midjourney 6. There you go. Midjourney 6. I was testing, so I made some. But it's a pastime on the Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. I know I should probably be drinking eggnog or doing something else, but it ends up being me sitting in Midjourney and playing.
Alex, do you think it would be appropriate to talk about the things we didn't get that we're disappointed in?
That we didn't get in from Christmas? No.
Yeah, I didn't get that MixPre I was hoping for in my stocking.
You're just gonna have to wait until next year. So anyway, well, thank you so much so much for all the great suggestions today. We're doing this every day. It really helps. If you are listening as a producer, it really, really helps for you to throw these ideas in. We take them very seriously. You can see me typing them. I put them in the notes so that I don't even have to go back and look at it. I want to look at that as we're brainstorming. It's super powerful for us. So please come on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's a little bit of a slow week. It's the perfect week for you to come in. Think about those suggestions. You can put those in the QR code right now for tomorrow. Tomorrow's audio. The next one, Thursday, is video. Friday is logistics. If you've got ideas in those areas, go ahead and start throwing those in and letting us know, because it's really, and just say audio dash or video dash or logistics dash, and then put your thing in if you're doing QR codes, or come back tomorrow and be part of the discussion. But we're going to be doing this every week or every day this week, and it really helps our councils think about what we're going to do and how we're going to organize all of this stuff as we go through it. So it's really, really important, and really it guides. Half of what we do is based on suggestions that are done in these brainstorming sessions, at least. Sometimes 75%. So please throw those in. And thanks to the panelists. Can't do this without you. It's oftentimes the days are either really busy or really small. Between Christmas and New Year's, it goes up and down every day. It's great. It's great. Whatever size it is, it always turns out to be a good conversation. And it's great to have all the panelists here. So thank you so much for jumping on. And thanks to the incredible team that even during all these holidays and everything else is still making sure that this show happens every day, 7 days a week, 365, sometimes 366 days of the year. Really appreciate everybody's effort. We traveled 81,000 miles today, 130,000 kilometers, and that is 642 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. There you go. I got so many good ideas. There's so many good ideas today. I got to think about where we're going to put them all. It's figuring out these long curves. It's not just what are we going to do next week, but like what's the whole curve of how that looks. That's the thing that's of trying to tell the whole story and trying to make sure we cover everything. That's the thing.
I think the visualization you had of the different types of content going through the weeks was really informative. It's cool.
That's how I think. So everything I do is very visual because I can't think in text. So I have to think about it, I had to do it that way. I had to make different colors and I had to do the different things. And then I look at it and then I can see patterns, what I want to do. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to go make some